Okay, thanks, Jim. Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Scotland's Towns Conference 21, a week-long series of events and sessions to help promote Scotland's towns. So this is day one, and this is the first of our international learning sessions. And while Scotland sometimes is applauded for its policy and direction, it's always really important that we learn from others and continue to partner with others. So I'm really pleased today to have Harvey from the Irish Heritage Council. I've been working with Alison for the last few years, and she is a tour de force, almost single-handedly dragged the Towns agenda in Ireland to the top table. And now Towns in Ireland are actually being nurtured and thought about in policy similar to what's happening in Scotland. Just as a quick introduction, when STP was established back in 2013-14 after the first Town Centre Action Plan, the first thing we did was to come and develop an evidential platform, to take a data-driven approach. So we constructed USP.Scot, Understanding Scottish Places, which was basically the first attempt to have a typology tool based in solid metrics to remove all the anecdote and emotion from decision making, to give people a factual and evidential data set representing their town. And that led us then to develop from that the town audit, full town audit for bigger towns, the smaller town audit for our smaller, more rural towns, etc. And Ali has been doing similar work in Ireland. So without further ado, I would like to hand you over to Ali, who's going to talk you through all the fantastic work that she has been driving as part of the Collaborative Town Centre Health Check in Ireland. So Ali, over to you and welcome.
Thanks very much, Phil, and thanks again for the invitation and for all your support. So it's an absolute pleasure working with you all. The collaboration hopefully will widen and deepen. I'm just going to talk about what we're doing in Ireland with the Collaborative Town Centre Health Check programme. So Ewan, if you would share my slides, that would be great.
Of course.
Thank you very much. Okay, so next slide in terms of the structure, what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm just going to sort of highlight, about collaboration and partnership. And I was listening to the Lunch and Learn as well. So, the language is very similar to what I'm sort of talking about over here. And it really did give me hope to hear the same sort of, words being used, the terminology. It's all about collaboration at the end of the day, and trying to get that synergy and that energy. So also then I'm going to touch on funding pathways, because fundamentally really what we're trying to do is look at the funding to try and get action. So we have, various funds or whatever. So I'll look at that as well. And then the benefits and the impact of the CTCHC program in Ireland, what is it actually doing on the ground? And then just to finish off, look at the 4 phases. So we're actually in phase 1 at the minute. So in terms of moving on to the next slide, Jen, thanks very much. Cheers. All right. So I started this in autumn 2016, as Phil said there. Basically, people just kept coming to me in the Heritage Council. I had set up a network called the Irish Wall Towns Network in 2005 and had got 4 million for that. And I suppose my background is regeneration. So people like Tara Buckley, who runs an organisation called RG Data, that's like all the sort of grocers in the town centres in Ireland. She came to me and said, Ali, is there anything you can do? So I didn't have any funding in the first year. I literally set up this program, went around the country, went around the universities and asked them would they work with me. So basically everybody that came on board knew that it was for the good of the country, and really we weren't in it for the money. I think that's pretty obvious at this stage. So just to say, we didn't have any funding in that first year. And then the Heritage Council board started to support what I was doing and came in and give me funds from then on. So we have 15 towns in the programme at the minute, and we also have a waiting list of 45 towns. So we have 70 plus partners. As I say, it's a huge collaboration. I have a nice visual here. Next slide. Workshops, things like that. So just to say now, Phil and I met originally at a conference in London. I think it was the ATCM, which I've been a member of for many years. And we were sort of chatting about what I was trying to do. I think I just started doing that. So then we had a workshop in Dundalk in December 2019, and Phil kindly came over. And we did a sort of facilitated workshop with about 50 people who were really interested in town centres. And that was kind of when we started to do and talk about town centres first. So the previous month, I had actually written a submission called Putting Town Centres First. So again, I was trying to get that sort of narrative out there and get that language out in our public, opinion, discourse, whatever, just to really get people talking about it. So then the programme for government came through in Ireland. That was agreed in June 2020. So Town Centres First was included in the programme for government. So that was a massive step forward for us because we didn't have anything and we didn't have any sort of hook before that. So that's the wording from our programme for government for our coalition government in Ireland. And really it focuses on using the CTCHC framework to gather data and to lead on actions. So, I mean, that's hugely important because, as I say, the programme, there's a massive waiting list. So next slide there, Ian, thanks. Okay, just to really highlight the role of the universities and the ITs, Institutes of Technology in Ireland. So in terms of the pillars, this is who we work with, government departments, we try to work with them as best we can, local authorities, regional assemblies. The third levels have just been immense. I really do want to highlight that, they were there with me day one, sort of saying, right, what can we do? How can we get the students active? What can they learn while we do this? Business representative groups and also civic society. So, I mean, that's the whole sort of collaborative model. So, really with the third levels, what was a necessity for me at the start has now become its USP of the programme. Next slide there, Ian, please. Okay, one of the things that I was quite surprised that I had to do at the very start was to set up a colour coding, a classification and a colour coding for GIS mapping. So, I mean, all our stuff is digitally mapped and we're actually hoping to move on to a digital platform next year. I've kind of been holding off on doing this because I've been waiting for the national policy, for the Town Centre First policy to come through. So, as I talked to you today, we still don't have that policy in place. So that's June 2020 to whatever, November 2021. So, all the towns use this classification colour coding. So we've started with Gold, as you probably know, and then we sort of built on Gold because Irish town centres are quite unique. We have such a sort of mixture of uses. And then obviously what we can do, because they all use the same methodology, is we can compare and contrast the towns because we're working at a programme level. And I think that's really critical, to highlight that previous to that, there was a sort of, a lot of towns were doing different things. It was kind of ad hoc. And as I say, we don't have the policy. So like the programme has been running without the policy in place. So, I really do need this policy now. Next slide, please. All right, just in terms of visuals, in terms of maps, I'm trying to do as much visuals, maps and things. So this is the 15 towns that I have in the programme at the minute. And really what happened at the start was the first workshop, 70 people came to it. And then the second workshop, 130 people turned up, right? So it was just myself and I started thinking, goodness, the numbers are going bonkers here. So I was trying to break it down into sort of strands that I could work with, that I could manage with. And obviously Brexit was sort of coming over the horizon at that time. So I set up a border towns network, and that would be for the towns along the border. And that's obviously, a European border now as well. And then the towns in the west of Ireland, because they probably, at that time really needed it. Okay, next slide, please. And then in terms of our waiting list, so this is the location of the 45 towns that are on the waiting list. Number one is Drogheda, and that's a really, really important town. So it's very near Dublin, and yeah, it's on the M1 corridor, the Dublin-Belfast corridor. So yeah, it's just really, really important that these towns get supported, because to me, this shows you the energy that's at, in the grassroots, that people are really wanting to see change and they're wanting to get help and support to move forward. Next slide, please. All right, again, because I'm working at a programme level, I'm able to sort of see and identify and highlight what the data gaps are. So, we do have systemic problems in our sort of, I suppose, our framework or system at the minute. And I really can't see us moving forward with our town centres unless these data gaps are A, acknowledged, and B, fixed. So what we're missing in terms of data sets, and Phil mentioned the importance of data, land use and vacancy. So we don't have a wide picture of vacancy. The 15 towns that we have in the programme are all delighted because obviously they're getting this data. Building condition, again, so we don't know the building condition of the vacant buildings. We don't have any up-to-date information on the heritage and cultural significance, because a lot of our architectural conservation areas were designated quite a long time ago. And also ownership. So we don't really know the pattern of ownership. We do know from working in the towns that what we're seeing, like, for example, in Dundalk, where Phil was with us, Dundalk, we're finding that the ground floor maybe is one owner or one family, and then the upper floors are somebody else, and then the backlands is somebody else again. So, this is the complexity of working in town centres. To me, it's the opportunity, and it's also the challenge, of getting stuck in. And really, that's what I've been doing the last few years, is, I suppose, just boots on the ground, getting stuck in. Next slide, please, there, Ian. Thank you. Okay, in terms of the methodology, so the land use survey that I showed there, that was step 2, the classification that we use. So that's step 2, then step 3. We're looking at sort of footfall. Step 4, we're looking at business surveys, consumer surveys, I mean, everything is just trying to sort of take the pulse of the town centre and get that information and do it in a collaborative way so that everybody understands it. Ownership map, as I say, that's a really hard step to do at the minute. Our land registry is not up to date. So it's really interesting to talk to the bids. Just to highlight as well, Phil and I have talked about this quite often. In Ireland, we only have 4 bids, 4 town centre bids. Okay, so our legislation was brought in 2006. Since then, we only have 4. So I don't know whether it was brought in to fail or what, but I know you guys have got a lot more. So, I mean, it's definitely something that concerns me, because how are we going to fix this sort of issue and the challenge without the right structures in place? So, yeah, it's really just to work through those steps with the towns, and then obviously get to the sort of publishing of the data, the summary report. So everything, again, is very visual. We don't write, lots of text. That's just not where I'm at. It is all about trying to sort of get the visual out there. So in terms of output, just the next slide there, Ian, thanks. This is an example of some of the output. So this is Sligo, one of the towns in the west of Ireland, population of about 20,000. We've done the land use survey. We've actually just updated it, so we'll be publishing that next week. So there's like 200 vacant buildings in the town centre. And again, because the ownership data set is not complete in the country, we now need to sort of set about finding out who owns these buildings. So it's like an extra step. It's an extra task because of the systemic issues that I raised in the previous slides. So yeah, it's just really, I suppose, trying to make sure that we get this engine and that the engine is working properly and that the regeneration can actually happen. In terms of further output, then the next slide just shows, Sligo, how we present the information, what do people want, what do consumers want. One of the things we found in Sligo pre-COVID was that most people in Sligo were shopping online, and when they were shopping online, they weren't using shops that were from Sligo. So there was a lot of leakage out of Sligo even before COVID. So that was they were kind of out of step. The patterns there were out of step with the rest of the towns that we have in the programme. Then the next slide is just a smaller town. So this is Tipperary town in County Tipperary. So the song, they're all very proud of their song. It's a long way to Tipperary. So yeah, Tipperary, population of about 5,000. They actually marched in the streets about 3 years ago to sort of ask for more help and more support. So then I got a call from one of our ministers asking me, would I help? So really what I was suggested, went for meetings and stuff and said they should come into the programme. So yeah, this is the survey. So they've got a vacancy rate of 31%. Sorry, should have said Sligo's around 18.4. And again, we've resurveyed Tipperary, so that's ready to go. And it's come down to 29%. And I mean, as most of you know, these vacancy rates are quite unheard of in a European context. So, I'm kind of teaching, I suppose, the programme, collaborating with them, saying that the range of normal ground floor commercial vacancy should be between 5 and 11%. So really what happened to me was when the first town came through, which was Tralee, and the vacancy rate was 24%, I knew I couldn't walk away from this programme. And that's really why I kept going at it. Okay, next slide, please. Just talk about funding. So yeah, at the minute we've got sort of, different departments dealing with different sized towns. The towns over 10,000 population are in one department. The towns less than 10,000 population are in another department, another government department. And the Heritage Council were in another department. So yeah, it's, again, we really need this national policy to pull this all together, to get the synergies, to get that sort of, collaborative energy and to get the whole thing going. And also just to say, to me, there seems to be a massive urgency that maybe is not quite sort of appreciated by the policymakers. That's because I work with the private sector, as I showed you with the pillars. It's very clear to me what these towns have been through, even before they went into lockdown. So just in terms of pathways, Tralee is the next slide, just to show you what happened there. So Tralee, we started in 2017. We started actually doing the data research in 2016, but then we published the report in 2017. So that was August. And then a few months later, Tralee won a national award, which was the Most Enterprising Town in Ireland award. And the judges' citation, very much focused on what we had been doing in terms of collaboration, networking, creating new relationships. Then the Historic Towns Initiative, which is a Heritage Council fund, we actually, gave them a grant of 200,000 for the town centre to do up some buildings. And then more recently, in the last few weeks, they've got over 15 million from the Department of Housing. So that's quite a large town, obviously. In terms of action, right, moving on then to what, again, because we're working at this programme level, it's really just to sort of highlight that there's a lot of structures that you guys have that we don't have yet. So, we don't even have the policy, the town centre first policy. And also I have 45 towns on a waiting list. CPO, our activity is quite low. It's very hard for the local authorities in Ireland to do CPO. So, I've been sort of pushing CSO this year. had a webinar on compulsory sale orders. It's really interesting, to see what you guys are trying to promote over there. We're also looking at community improvement districts. Because we have so few business improvement districts, Holland is looking at community improvement districts, and I know you guys have been talking about that too. Community development trusts, we don't have those in Ireland, so that would be obviously where the community is a developer. Conservation area regeneration schemes, community led. This is of huge interest to me. I'm actually doing some research looking at your CARS model in Scotland, and could we possibly adapt that for Ireland, with whatever cultural changes are needed. Heritage action zones, again, we don't have those in Ireland. We're really missing out in the community-led approach, which is why I think our CTCHC program is so popular. And also just to really say, I'm kind of sort of pivoting now towards spatial digital dashboards even. So yeah, the UNECE Aarhus convention, really what we're trying to do is get that information out for citizens and make sure that the dashboards can be used by everybody. It's not just about practitioners, it's really just trying to push that out. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, just a summary of what I've been doing this year with the program. So in February, we had a webinar with the Irish Regions European Office. They're based in Brussels, so they sort of look at the funding that's coming into Ireland. And we were looking at indicators for town centres, under the Green Deal, what kind of new indicators would be needed. Then in May, we did a webinar on compulsory sale order, and we were also involved with the Scottish Land Commission, so they were talking at that. So what was really interesting for me, again, was that 400 people turned up to that webinar. So you can just see the sort of desire for, data and information and environmental information to help people in our country and in our towns. And then the UCC, which is University College Cork, they did a seminar with the young planners. So they actually organised that. We had a session on the digitalisation of data. Then more recently, we did a webinar on meanwhile use, trying to push that. We've got some research done on that. So that's been really, really popular as well. And then I have an event on Wednesday, which is called Reeling in the Year. So that's really just with the towns talking about what they've actually managed to get done this year on the ground. So that's going to be Wednesday afternoon. So you're very welcome to come to that. Okay, next slide, please. Right, just to finish up and talk about benefits. So, again, my background would have been, I started on Peace and Reconciliation Programme 1 in Northern Ireland when I was a consultant. So I worked on that for a few years before moving south. So I suppose really everything I'm trying to do is to make sure that it's kind of program friendly, that it fits with what the European Commission is looking for. So it is a data-driven program. It's fundamentally about getting the data that wasn't there. We're looking at evidence-based planning. We're really trying to improve the planning system. It's about sort of, sharing of spatial data. It's looking at the UN SDGs. Really what we're trying to do is look at support and funding. Like we really want to, talk to the European Commission, make sure that they're sort of aware. That I met with the IREO in January and they said to me, look, just keep going. This is exactly what we want. So, really what we're trying to do is make sure that we can talk to the European Commission. We also social capital, we're really trying to create that and sort of have a conversation about what is social capital and how do you measure it. That's really, really important. Social cost benefit appraisal. Also, in terms of local regeneration engines, I keep saying to people like regeneration doesn't just happen. It's actually hard work. And if you don't have the engine, it's very hard to do it. So I'm kind of like really impressed with what you guys have. And from talking to Phil and working with Phil, all those structures that you have, like we don't have an Irish Towns partnership. So yeah, again, that's one of the things we need as well once we get the policy done. Enhanced collaborative processes. So like really what I'm talking about is promoting participative democracy and creating sort of regeneration focus, for communities. And it's really trying to pivot towards the communities and making sure that they're stronger, that they're, that they're enhancing their sense of place, that they know how to do it, sense of pride and sense of belonging. So, really what we're talking about is sort of human flourishing. All right, next slide, just to sort of summarize. In terms of, this is a visual that I gave to the government back in January. So this is really the context for, what I'm doing. The program is sort of in the middle. We have the program for government to the left. I've recently set up an Irish diaspora network for towns. So it's the Irish Towns Diaspora Network. And that came about because I did a podcast late last year during lockdown. I thought, goodness, what am I going to do? Got 10 speakers, 10 excellent speakers. So yeah, have a listen to that. Then the feedback that I just kept getting over Christmas was from the Irish diaspora in Japan and Argentina and Canada. So, again, it's just really interesting to sort of talk to you guys to see what way are you approaching your diaspora, because it's going to be so important for us coming out of this lockdown. And then on the right-hand side, obviously, we've got the UN SDGs, we've got the European Commission in terms of their Green Deal. And, you know, we're just obviously trying to make sure that we're talking the language about how this program works, what the benefits are, what the multiplier effect is, and how, you know, communities benefit from this. So yeah, I've been very, very busy. The 4 phases, I'm in phase 1. I never thought that it would be such a heavy lift. The 4 phases really should run concurrently. And I'm going to take 3 towns now into phase 2. But as I say, I'm doing that without a town centre first policy. So wish me luck. It's been an adventure and a journey, and I've met some wonderful people along the way, and everybody is working on the programme who started with me at the start. We've just grown and grown. So thank you very much. Thank you for the time, for your time.
It was great, Ali. A lot of progress made in a short period of time, and without significant political backing like STP got. So well done. We have question bar at the side. If anybody's got particular questions for Ali, I see Barbara is asking, how do you gather your footfall? I suppose, is that sensors or manual counts? Can you explain how you gather?
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting because we sort of have a range of ways that we're collecting it. You know, like the bids, obviously, as I say, because we've only got 4 bids, they've got the counters, the software counters, right? And they're sort of moving into buying and upgrading their technology. So I know Dundalk's doing that at the minute because they've kind of offered their stuff to Tipperary. And then we literally we have manual counters, right, to sort of teach people how to do footfall counting. And then with UCC, we actually started using apps and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's really interesting for me to sort of see the range. And also, I suppose really what we're trying to do is, if we're working with the universities and the ITs, is that the students learn about spatial awareness. So we don't want to go too far. And then obviously we've got the bids, who are the sort of professional people and the practitioners, and they've got funding for that. So yeah, it's varied. And I kind of like having it like that, you know. So I mean, I have found myself, maybe somebody doesn't turn up and I'm standing out in the street with a counter. It's like a sort of rugby match or a GAA match, you know, counting people. But again, you know, if you're trying to teach people the very basics, and as I say, we're starting from a very low base in this country, you know, with the phase 1, which didn't exist, and you know, as Phil, he's been helping us along the way. So we're just really keen to learn. I don't want to go too fast with the software because I need people to come with me every time.
Okay, no, that's great. I've been over a few times now, and obviously being Irish myself, I'm fairly familiar. There's Scotland and Ireland obviously are both Celtic nations. They're both similar size, geography. Obviously a big difference. Ireland didn't really industrialize the same way as Scotland did. But what do you think is the biggest advantage Irish towns have over Scottish towns?
Ooh. Okay, I don't know about advantage, right? So let's be totally honest here. I want to widen and deepen this collaboration. So, okay, what's our comparative advantage? I don't know if it's an advantage as such, but I mean, we do have an amazing sort of civic society structure, right? Which is not really formalized, but we do have an amazing organization called Tidy Towns program, right? And I think that needs to bring in the youth as well. And what's really interesting is next year is going to be European Year of the Youth, right? So Ursula von der Leyen's talking about that. Also as well, you know, because we don't have the bids, we're very, do you know what I mean? We're going to be relying on those existing structures more than possibly we should have to rely on them. So yeah, that's sort of that civic pride, that Tidy Towns, GAA, which is a Gaelic Athletics Association. So that's like the hurling and Gaelic football. They would be very, very strong. You'd see an overlap in those committees in the towns. And obviously as well, the business communities that have managed to keep going. You know, some of whom are, I'm sure, absolutely knackered. Now they've got Christmas to sort of deal with, you know. So I really, really enjoy working with all those different people. And again, really what you're trying to find is this sort of champion in the town centre or in the town. And also just that energy. I mean, they'll think you know me well enough now. You know, I just can't really be around negativity. I just really thrive myself off positive people, you know.
No, that's great. I mean, from my perspective, I see a step advantage from Ireland as having not going down the route of clone towns. You know, and we had a very sort of developer-led, formulaic approach to our town centres, which was, you know, predominantly retail-driven. And now we've got a proliferation of retail. It's quite hard to unpick all of that. But in Ireland, one of the things that I really like, you know, the likes of Sligo, Dundalk, Monaghan, is just the uniqueness of the small family independent businesses. You know, you still have the butcher and the baker and the candlestick maker, whereas in Scotland, we're sort of, our more successful towns are sort of moving back to that type of smaller, independent, more niche.
That's a lovely point, Phil, because, you know, I suppose our larger towns would be more sort of, you know, with the UK multiples, and it's very interesting to sort of see the UK multiples and where are they in Ireland and where they're not, particularly say like Marks and Spencer's or Next, you know, because Marks and Spencer's is not very well developed here. So, but also, you know, just in terms of like that community spirit, I mean, that's a thing that Irish people are very, very proud of, you know. So I suppose it's trying to tap into what is there. And as you're talking about the sort of morphology, yeah, that's very original and unique. And I mean, I think we found that with the classification. So we would have sort of grocers and fishing tackle and mattresses, you know. So we've got sort of photographs of excellent shops. I'm thinking of Monaghan, some of the shops, you know, where there's just like, when they say mixed juice, it really is, you know, it's always sort of a pleasure to come upon these kind of shops, you know. So yeah.
I have to say, I arrived at Monaghan recently, and it was International Canada Day. So there's some sort of random connection. Somebody from Monaghan must have went to Canada for a visit and decided to set up a reciprocal day. And it was tremendous because the entire town centre had been, the market stalls set up, and they had the most bizarre activities. But these are things that would draw people in right across the border. You would see people coming from Armagh down to Monaghan. So there's a cross-border stuff as well. But I actually got, I got handling snakes. That's my memory. People had like a reptile corner, which was unbelievable.
I'll tell them. But no, I mean, that's a really interesting question, Phil. I mean, I think, you know, we could talk about that for quite a while. So, you know, I think as well, one of the things that we really got stuck into was the universities and the ITs. Yeah. And you know, we have a housing crisis over here. So it was really, really important that those young people were given a voice. So that has been wonderful. And also, as I say, with the UCC, with the Young Planners Forum. So they've actually set up a forum, and they're going to start organising events now in 2022, which I'll be supporting, funding or whatever, you know. And that event was on the digitisation of data for town centres. So yeah, we're just really trying to sort of make sure that, as I say, we bring everybody with us, so that we're all together in this, you know.
Just I'm interested to find out what sort of impact has the combination of COVID and climate emergency had in the towns. Just for your own knowledge, in Scotland, our city centres have been particularly hit hardest, you know, with less people coming in to work, less students coming in, less tourism. Whereas the towns, because people are resident more in their town instead of commuting, the towns have actually seen a wee bit of a renaissance. Is that a sort of similar pattern that's happened?
Yeah, that's really similar because, you know, like Ireland is a very sort of, we have a lot of towns, you know, that is our settlement pattern, a nation of towns. So yeah, I mean, the towns have had a bit of a lift, and people have sort of bought properties, you know, maybe to look at sort of, you know, reusing a derelict property where they wouldn't have thought of it before. And again, that's why the policy is so needed. The cities, yes, definitely. There's been a bit of a, you know, migration back to the towns. And you can sort of see that as well in the sort of sense of civic pride that's coming through. And also with that waiting list, you know, that waiting list grew and grew during lockdown because people were sort of saying to me, they were rediscovering their localities in the 2K and the 5K restrictions, you know, so they were seeing all these sort of vacant buildings in their town centres or whatever. And they were just looking for help, you know. So I mean, I just want to be clear that waiting list grew during lockdown, which to me was a very, you know, important signal that these people really wanted to get on with it, you know, wanted help.
Okay, so this is a call to everybody in the audience. You have the chat bar there if there's anything specific you'd like to ask Ali. She is a font of all knowledge when it comes to Irish towns, I can assure you of that.
Fraser's question. So I was just going to say about Fraser and vacancy. I mean, one of the things that is alarming to me is the level of our vacancy rates, Phil, you know. I mean, I would have worked on sort of surveys like this in Belfast and Northern Ireland before I moved down south in 2000. So the vacancy rates are just, you know, if you're looking at, I mean, it used to be 4% was the target when I was sort of starting out. Now it seems to have moved a wee bit to 5.5 pre-COVID. But like we're getting vacancy rates, commercial vacancy rates of 29-31%, you know.
Okay. I'm going to ask you a question then. Given what you've said about the wider civic society, and I'm aware of it, and obviously you've got a huge diaspora. Scotland has 5.5 million people and 25 million diaspora. You have 4.5 and 40 million diaspora. So why do you feel that there is that structural gap in terms of no bids or community improvement districts, or you don't have the development trust network like Scotland has? What do you think is the reasoning for that?
I honestly think it's because Ireland is quite a young country. You know, I mean, we only got our independence 100 years ago. So, I mean, I'm just, I suppose, one of a growing group of people who are really trying to make sure that our country progresses, and that we get the policy frameworks and the structures in place. So it's a very interesting question, Phil, and it's something that I've sort of been thinking about for many, many months, you know, because I can't understand why we've only got 4 bids. And I suppose maybe the legislation, if I could just give an example in that case, that the legislation was brought in 2006, but there was no National Project Support Office created. So there's no PSO for them to go to. And also there's no national strategy for the development, you know, of that legislation into policy. So, I mean, that would not be what I would be used to coming from, you know, working in other places. And yeah, it's just, I suppose it's very strange. You know, I think we need to have a stronger culture of evaluation, a stronger culture of sort of, you know, putting things out there and testing them. And if they don't work, we move on. But I really wouldn't recommend that the best, like to me, that's not best practice to bring in a bid legislation and not do anything to follow it up.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, we've had this conversation many times. Ideally, now that you've got town centre first policy embedded into programme for government, now's the time to have something similar to STP established over there. And
Very much so.
Which could help drive the creation of bids, but also just act as that, basically to professionalise what you're doing, scale up what you're doing. You need to have that level of collaboration. But then, you know, we've seen that there's a lot of fiefdoms, you know, there's a lot of different movers and actors, and sometimes it's difficult to weave all that together and just get that central, credible, trusted resource.
I think so, and I think that's the challenge and the exciting thing for me and others that I'm working with, you know, the people that I'm collaborating with, you know, like we sort of see climate change as an opportunity. We see the Green Deal as an opportunity for town centres to, as you say, you know, sort of have a renaissance or whatever. But I mean, we can't do that unless we have structures in place. I mean, it's not actually good spending of the public purse, you know, it doesn't get you the accruals that you need. And it doesn't get you the value for money. So, I mean, my background, I think, Phil, you and I have the same qualifications, you know, so I'm like sort of economics with planning. And everything that I do is trying to look at sort of what is efficient, you know, what makes good value for money. And I get everything that I do evaluated. And again, that's not always the case in the Republic of Ireland. So, I mean, I came from that, I suppose, that European driven culture, and also the Green Book, which, you know, we don't have really an equivalent Green Book structure system in Ireland, you know. So yeah, I mean, it's exciting, I think, you know, because we have a lot of our diaspora who are working in best practice systems, and they're feeding that back. And that's why that we're really hoping the Diaspora Network will be one of those structures that helps to move our country on for innovation. We have some of the best tech companies in Europe based in Ireland. Yeah. And we need to just make sure that our public systems and our public sector benefits from that as well.
Okay, there's a couple of questions in the chat bar. One in particular from Fraser will begin with, can you give a couple of examples of action, you know, things that have actually changed on the basis of your collaborative town centre health check?
Okay, so because we have the baselines now in place, you're more likely to get funding. Okay, so we have 2 major funding streams from the government, which is the Rural Regeneration Development Fund and the Urban Regeneration Development Fund. So, for example, with Tralee, it's now got 15 million. And that's been the whole journey, starting with the CTCHC. And I mean, I was in a presentation a few weeks ago, a conference, and the Kerry ones were saying to me, like, it all started with the CTCHC and the networks that were created, that they remained and continued. And, you know, and what we really need to do now, as Phil's saying, is we need to sort of have a formalized system. Whereas, you know, I've got this program without any policy. And I mean, all that needs to be tightened and put in place. So yeah, I mean, really those networks, I mean, I would love to, as an Irish person, to have a minister for networks. I think it's something that our country could actually thrive on, because we're so good at, as the OECD keeps telling us, relationship-based society. That's what we are. We don't have systems like Germany. So like we need to sort of tilt that back a wee bit and go more systems. I'm not saying we're going to be Germany, but like, you know, we just relationship-based societies. You know, again, the OECD said that they're more open to corruption. So, I mean, I, as a citizen, would like to see that our systems are for the benefit of the public purse and for citizens, you know.
Yeah. I can't believe that Ireland, being Ireland, doesn't have a green book. Surely that's the country in the world that would invent a green book.
Okay, we've got Fulch Ireland.
There's another question here from Luke Fraser. What IT platform do you have for the data collection and for displaying the data?
That's a lovely That's a lovely question and very timely, because I have been waiting for Town Centre First, and now obviously the push is on because people just want me to go ahead anyway, and myself included. So the Central Statistics Office, their SDG unit, has come on board about 2 months ago as a partner. So we'll be moving in 2022 Q1 to move on to those digital dashboards. I've already had conversations and meetings and stuff to sort of look at how we're going to do the dashboards, but it's going to be very visual. And really and truly, what I want to do is sort of, I keep saying to people, it's about the sort of democratization of data. So it's trying to get the data out to citizens. And again, the OECD has another report on Ireland. I have to say, I love the OECD. I wouldn't have got my degree without the OECD. So all their reports, superb reports. So yeah, the OECD has a report on why Ireland needs to be a data-driven public sector and how we need to keep up. You know, the citizens expect this data, and they expect it to be, you know, that there has to be sort of online platforms, which we don't have. And again, that's one of the things that, you know, is in my sights for 2022. I would have loved to have done it in 2021, but I just didn't think the timing was right. I was waiting for TCF to sort of get a bit of, to be bedded in a bit. And now we, you know, definitely in terms of the media are all over town centres and vacancy and a housing crisis. Like, you know, you really shouldn't have vacancy at the levels that we have when we've got a housing crisis. So I think next year is going to be absolutely manic. This year has been crazy, but I really do think next year is going to be a year of transformation for our town centres in terms of getting that data out there and working with, you know, other collaborators, such as Phil and obviously the European Commission. So and our diaspora, you know, it's really to ask the diaspora, like, what are you guys doing in Canada? Because, like, you know, we're hearing from all over the world about what they're doing, and I really don't want to sort of be preaching. I want to sort of see, okay, what are they doing there? Can we cherry pick that? Can we do that? What works? What doesn't work? Yeah, that would be the sort of the comparative advantage, I suppose, of having a massive diaspora. We now need them, and we've kind of said to them, look, we need you, we need your help now.
Yeah, and the Irish being Irish, they will help. In terms of digital in Ireland, which helps drive a lot of the collection of data and intelligence, where do you see yourselves compared to Scotland in terms of digital infrastructure?
Well, I mean, we had Diane Rennie talking at one of my events there with UCC. So she was saying about the 35 million investment in planning and digital platforms and stuff. So, and I mean, obviously then there's town centres. You know, I keep saying to people that town centres are not just about planning, it's about society, really. So the digital thing to me is next year. I mean, it's just really, I would imagine it's just going to be transformative, Phil. You know, at this stage, I'm talking to sort of people who can start to do the platform design and the software engineers. I'm putting my toe in the water with a project that I'm working on at the minute, which is called Engage Kilkenny, which is going to be a digital platform for people to sort of feedback on buildings, traditional buildings, historic buildings that they like, just to get that sort of, because really we have to almost like train everybody, including myself, how to use that, because I think we're starting from, again, a lower base. And because we've got all these high-tech digital companies in Ireland, you know, I will be approaching them as well to say, look, you know, we need your help too. You know, I mean, LinkedIn for me is a key one, because I've met all the diaspora through LinkedIn. And, you know, there's no reason why LinkedIn, it's based in Dublin. It has its European headquarters in Dublin, as does Facebook. So, you know, those kind of things really are something that we can tap into. But digital, definitely. I think as well, Ursula von der Leyen's State of the Union address last September was all about digital.
Okay. Do you have a political champion? Because in Scotland, town centres have been seen to be critical in terms of social, economic, environmental infrastructure. Now we're seeing in policy towns being embedded into the likes of the National Planning Framework. And both at the UK and Scottish Government level, we're starting to see significant resources being pointed towards our town and city centres. Do you have that type of political drive in Ireland? Are the politicians starting to see the agenda more clearly?
Yeah, I think they are, because again, it's coming from the grassroots. You know, I mean, this is almost like a sort of it's almost sort of become a movement. You know, as I say, like just it started on Twitter and various things like that. There's a really good sort of movement called #DerelictIreland, who I work with as well. So yeah, I mean, we're trying now. The media are on the phone all the time. I've meetings tomorrow with the media, with newspapers and stuff. So I suppose it is really trying to get that message out to the public, so that TDs who may not be in the programme or associated with the programme are aware of what we're trying to do. But it's definitely, you know, even sort of our political, you know, shows that are on TV and stuff, it's definitely coming through in terms of being talked about a lot more about town centres, the opportunities for vacant property, and also the opportunity for transforming our town centres for the good of society and for climate change and meeting those targets. So a political champion, we don't have one. I mean, I would love to have that one political champion. We did obviously get put into the programme for government. So, somebody was looking out for us and also looking at the policy. So, there was Malcolm Noonan. Malcolm is a Minister for State. So he's what we would call a junior minister. So Malcolm has been very, very good that way. So, thanks to Malcolm. But in terms of, a senior department minister, I mean, hopefully next year then this will just build and continue, because that's really where we need to be at. So it's a very interesting question, Phil, because I think we're at a very sort of important stage, because the media is so, and when I say the media, I mean everybody's phoning, TV companies. Like we have a TV program coming out in January with a series called Eco Eye. So that would be our environmental series in RTE. So that would be like the public broadcaster. And then, as I say, we have all the newspapers, and everybody's interested, and we're all trying to, I mean, I don't have any support team. I don't have any staff. So I'm trying to do the communications as well as I can, or as best as I can. I really enjoy that side of it, actually, I have to be honest. But yeah, it's a bit crazy. I would love to, as I said to Malcolm, I would love to have a team, and I would love to have somebody who could do the communications.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important that sometimes a media-driven agenda can sometimes just focus on all the negative stories about vacancies and voids and so on, and you miss out the really positive stuff about what communities are doing. But also, when I think of Scotland's towns, I mean, Scotland as a nation invented half of the modern world, and those inventions came from our towns predominantly. The built environment in Scotland, again, is outstanding. It's a storybook of our journey as a nation. When you take a look at the streetscapes and the spires, the churches, there's lots and lots of things that we can build upon. So I think the story has to be always pointing towards the art of the possible. Instead of just, look, we know there's an issue, but we also know there's a solution. So with climate change, we need to have more dense population. We've got some built fabric already existing within our town that could easily be transformed into a more relevant use. Let's think about using taxation or fiscal levers or policy to actually ensure that all happens. So whenever Scotland's Towns Partnership first set off on the journey, we literally just spent every month filling the national newspapers with the town series, talking about what the new railway line down to Tweedbank and Galashiels would do for the towns along that journey, and the potential for sustainable economic growth. And looking at our culture towns, our thematic towns, towns like West Kilbride that reinvented themselves around craft. Wigtown had books as a hook. Kirkcudbright was for artists. Oban was for seafood and tourism. So just showing people that if you get a spark, an idea, and good leadership, that things could happen, and I think you've got a real can-do attitude in Ireland, and a young population, a very highly educated population as well. So with a focus on drawing it together, I think you'll see success sooner rather than later. So you're moving in the right direction, put it like that.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel, especially this year, like I do feel that people are phoning me and saying you can feel there's a change, right? There's a momentum gathering, and we've had so many events, and also I'm working, like there's a whole sort of gang of us, this sort of band of few as we started out as, and now it's just growing and growing. So, that's really, really enjoyable to sort of go through that journey, because like what we are trying to do is bring innovation to the systems in our country. And as you asked me earlier, how come maybe we're sort of a bit behind, but given that the European Commission has sent to me as well, the IREO, the Irish Regions European Office, and the money goes through that office from Europe to the 3 regions in Ireland. And they're saying to me, just keep going. That's exactly what we want, So really what I suppose, the thing with the young people in the universities, that's definitely something that we want to sort of, really try and highlight to Europe, because I actually did a presentation in Brussels a few years ago to ECDG Grow, and they really wanted to know, like, this model is really collaborative. Like, we don't see anything else like this in terms of like mainland Europe, right? So they were sort of wanting to know, how did you get the universities involved? Why did you do it that way? I was trying to explain, I didn't have any money. and it was a necessity, but like those people are fantastic. And I'm thinking of a meeting I had with the president of IT Sligo, and he said to me, why were we not in the pilot program, which, I sort of had 7 and then just grew from that. And he said to me, we want to be Tralee. And like, they're all sort of, it's kind of a lovely, competitive spirit, which I think is really nice. And you get that at a program level, and you don't get that if you're doing projects, just isolated projects, which I have no time for. I know from working on other programs in the north that it's better to have a program than to have these ad hoc projects where you can't evaluate, you can't compare, you can't do the lessons learned, which is something that I do regularly to sort of see what worked, what didn't work, testing this, going up this way, coming back, going up, that to me is the joy of trying to sort of set this whole ecosystem up. And that's really what we're trying to do, is to create this sort of the structures and an ecosystem to manage our town centres, which doesn't exist at the minute.
Yeah. I had the privilege of presenting the inaugural Digital Times Awards in Sligo just before COVID came. And I have to say, it was early 90s was the last time I had been in Sligo at Flaccio, the big national, the equivalent of our national mod. And I had seen real significant progress in Sligo. And the collaborative was there. So the universities, the health people, the IT providers, the town centre businesses, the bid, the cinema provision, etc. There was a real feeling of energy, and basically Sligo had sold itself as a lifestyle proposition. So people who would have worked for Google or one of the big tech companies in Dublin had decided that they could bring their family and still get a beautiful house with the wild coastline, the beach. So that has been the sort of trajectory for the West. The Wild Atlantic Way is now seeing a lot of people thinking the pressure on housing in Dublin is just so immense. We can actually get so much more in the rural hinterland. And now with COVID and blended work patterns, we can work remotely. And the infrastructure coming in from the rural broadband program as well is enhancing the sort of backhaul speeds and bandwidth. So there's definitely a lot of potential. I'm going to ask you a tongue-in-cheek one, Ali. Why are all of Irish towns so far away? It's a long, long way from Clare to here. And it's a long way to Tipperary. Could you not build them a bit closer? Yeah.
Okay, I think the one with Claire was maybe written by somebody in America. So and the other one is obviously a famous song from the British Army. So I mean, again, I'm working with Tipperary. It's interesting now to go through the War of Independence and all that entails with Tipperary and its military heritage. Fascinating. So I mean, we do sort of say about, that the Irish were the hands that built America, and obviously we built the canals and stuff in Britain and things like that. So yeah, I mean, it's, I'm here to collaborate with, Scottish, Irish, whatever, French. I do believe that we are global citizens, and that's really what I'm excited about for next year, that the lockdown has enabled us to see globally in a way, in a global reach. And that's what I was saying to people in recent conferences, that the program that we have now, the CTCHC program, has a global reach, which I never envisaged, but it happened because of lockdown and the podcast and the diaspora saying we want to contribute, we want to help our town that they've come from, or they also want to help a town, they want to be mentors to towns in our country, which is just really amazing. And it just builds again on that sort of spirit that we had with the universities and the ITs, a great collaborative spirit. And I heard it in the lunchtime thing, the speaker was talking about collaboration and partnership. And I think you have to be a certain type of animal to like that. And I think really what we need to do now is convince the people and the politicians who maybe haven't pivoted to that as yet, that we need to convince them why they should.
It's essential. All hands to the pump. The podcasts I could recommend for anybody listening in, the podcasts that Ali pulled together during COVID were absolutely outstanding. They were brilliant, really a big source of inspiration. I enjoyed participating and listening into those. I've got another question in the question bar for you, Ali, from Barbara. It's quite pertinent from us because obviously we have a wee bit of an advantage in terms of having our USP platform and an established town centre audit process. And we've probably got somewhere in the region of 100 of our towns in that model, so we can compare and contrast. But we also have recognised that very often we're maybe measuring the wrong thing. So there's a big conversation now about well-being economy. There's a big conversation about climate. We are bringing our data collaborative together early next year to look at the metrics. What is, is what we're measuring still worth measuring, and what are we missing in terms of health and well-being and climate? But the important question here that Barbara has is your evaluation framework. What is that evaluation process? Because in a world of tight resource, you really do need to prove that what you're doing is making a difference. So could you talk about your evaluation process?
Yeah, I mean, I would say evaluation to me, it's sort of like a stick of rock for me, again, coming from the Northern Ireland Peace and Rec background. So, I'd be thinking of all levels. So it would be the program evaluation, making sure that I'm not wasting taxpayers' money. And I mean, there's absolutely no fat in my program. I can be absolutely 100% sure of that because I'm running it every day. And then also the projects, just trying to make sure that we're measuring the right information. As I was saying there, we've started to sort of work with the European Commission, IREO, looking at indicators for the Green Deal, because, I don't feel that we have the right indicators in place for our town centres, for the new era of our town centres. So, you mentioned climate change as well. And it's really, I suppose, that will be my first workshop in the new year. We'll be looking at doing, how do we move on those new indicators? And it's really interesting now because people are phoning me actually from the local authorities, and they're saying to me, Ali, do you have any indicators for town centres, and I'm like, look, listen, I'm on the case. I haven't got it done yet because there's only me. But yeah, I mean, I think that really every single thing that we do, you have to be aware of what are the benefits, what are the impacts, what's the multiplier effect, also what's the direct, indirect impacts, and again, because we don't have the Green Deal, sorry, not the Green Deal, the Green Book, we don't really have that culture of evaluation. So I'm, again, trying to sort of bring that into the narrative that this is a normal thing to do. And this has very clearly been told to me, been said to me by the IREO to keep doing what I'm doing, because the lady who works in the IREO office in Brussels started out in Peace and Rec in the admin side. And I started out in Peace and Rec in the sort of consultancy side. So she knows what I know, and we all, she knows that I know what she needs and all that kind of stuff. So it's a very different system that, also during the Programme for Government talks in Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, it was made very clear that the European Commission wanted more evaluation. Yeah. Okay, so that, I mean, I kind of knew that anyway, because I was seeing a very different system to what I'd seen in Northern Ireland. And that to me is a really exciting thing of bringing people on that journey as well, because to me, evaluation, that's about the sort of craft and your profession and making sure that you're actually doing a good job. And I have absolutely no problem doing that, because again, to me, that's, you should be able to sort of say, no, that's not working, and this is why it didn't work. This was brilliant. Let's replicate that. That is really, we need to be free and safe to talk like that,
I like the acronyms, especially the IREO. You need to be very careful. You know the way Ireland's got a history of having these organisations, but I remember speaking at the Irish Royal
RIAI, yeah,
Office, and I said it every time I said it. I said I'm going to Dublin to speak to the IRA, and the number of people that were going, Phil, what have you done?
So, I know. Acronyms kind of get you like that, don't they? So the IREO, that's the Irish Regions European Office. So that's they oversee the funds that come in from Europe into Ireland, and that's just really, really important that we get that right, that we don't lose out on the funds. That would be madness.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we obviously with Brexit, we will not have access to any of these structural funds in the future. But the replacement funds, we just need to watch and wait. The initial approach from government UK government has bypassed Scottish government, so there's a lot of politics at play. But at the end of the day, I suppose getting resource down to the towns and cities is what's critical.
Yeah, and Phil, I mean, you and I sort of agreed that we would work together and collaborate. And I think we did that a few weeks before there was actually a bilateral agreement between the Scottish government and the Irish government on collaboration, right? So we were sort of going, oh, look at this is great. This is perfect for us because we've already agreed to work together. And then I think you came over to Dundalk a few weeks later. So again, I think we're on the right track. Obviously, our government, your government wants to work more closely together within that sort of post-Brexit environment and how that works out. But I mean, definitely, there's a common history there. I'm thinking of places like Donegal and stuff, in the northwest of Ireland. I mean, a lot of people in Donegal moved to Scotland. Scottish people came over. Monaghan as well, like Cavan. I mean, we have a lot of connections with Scotland, and we would be very proud of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've got Coatbridge, which is Little Ireland, and we've got Port Glasgow. And 10,000 out of the 15,000 population in Port Glasgow are direct descent Irish. So a lot of your diaspora over here. Listen, I'm going to take this opportunity to thank you, Ali. It's been fantastic hearing all the progress, all your energy and enthusiasm and knowledge, and we will just keep engaging as organizations and individuals to make sure that we're sharing and learning from each other. So thanks so much for being the first of our international speakers this week at our conference. Wish you all the best in your endeavors. Obviously, we're just a phone call away, and hopefully we can just continue this good work together. So thanks a million on behalf of Scotland for coming along today and for giving us all your insights. Pleasure as always.
Thank you, Phil, for all your support. I really do want to highlight you've been amazing to me. You've been such a good guy. It's been a pleasure to work with you.
I don't often hear that, Ali, so thanks.
I'm sure you do.
Thank you both very much for your session as well. And if I could just remind those who are watching that you can check out the agenda for tomorrow in the reception area of this interface. And we very much look forward to seeing you for tomorrow's sessions and for the rest of the week. Thank you for joining us. And thank you very much to Ali and Phil for that very interesting session on international learning and collaboration. Let's have a lovely afternoon.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.